Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the fourth day of the 17th Vermont Organics Recycling Summit. We're super excited to have folks joining us again for this fourth day of the week-long program. The Vermont Organics Recycling Summit is organized by the Composting Association of Vermont in partnership with Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. I'm Natasha Duarte, the director of the Composting Association of Vermont. And this summit is a kickoff of sorts for International Compost Awareness Week, which starts this Sunday, May 7th. International Compost Awareness Week is the largest and most comprehensive education initiative of the compost industry. And the theme for this year that we've also adopted is for healthier soil, healthier food, compost. And I just want to point out this poster on the right here. This is from a project of UVM students in Dr. Deb Nair's Composting Ecology and Management class. And the full collection of posters, including the inspiration that the students had for producing these posters based on the theme, is available on the CAV website at compostingvermont.org/VORS. So it's a really neat program that we like to promote and support the students in getting engaged in composting. I also want to thank all of our sponsors who allow us to put this week-long program on free of charge to all of our participants, which has really helped us extend the reach of the summit and access to the summit. Our sponsors include Community Bank, Nature Cycle, Eco Products, Vegware, Addison County Solid Waste Management District, AgriLab Technologies, Vermont Natural Ag Products, the Vermont Produce Program from the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, and RMI. So huge thanks to those folks who are, many of them, perennial sponsors of the summit. Really helps us put this program together. Here we are in today's program. We're starting the day off with Tom Akin, who is going to be talking about NRCS programs that support organics management and on-farm composting. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and invite Tom to share his. Tom is the conservation agronomist with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Services, NRCS, in Colchester, Vermont. And with that, take it away, Tom.
Great. Thank you, Natasha. Good morning, everyone. As Natasha said, I'm Tom Akin. I'm the conservation agronomist with NRCS in Vermont. I'm based out of the Colchester office. I worked in Massachusetts for a really long time. I was the agronomist down there from 2003 to 2015, and then the state resource conservationist in Massachusetts until 2021. And in 2022, I replaced Sandra Primard, who was the agronomist in Colchester for a very long time. So I'm delighted to be here. And I just want to share a little bit about what NRCS can offer as far as assistance to you folks who are interested in composting programs. And just a little bit, if you don't know who we are, the Natural Resources Conservation Service has been in business for almost 90 years. This gentleman here on the left, Hugh Hammond Bennett, founded the agency back in the early 30s as a result of the Dust Bowl, and we used to be called the Soil Conservation Service, and focused primarily on agronomy and soil conservation. But over the years, we've broadened our reach, and we now assist farmers with not only agronomy and engineering, but we also assist forest landowners and landowners who are interested in wildlife. And so we're kind of a jack of all trades. We are non-regulatory, so farmers voluntarily enter into conservation plans with our assistance, and then once a farmer decides to do that, once they enter into the conservation planning phase and they process, and then they agree to work on some identified problems that they have. Once those goals and objectives are articulated and some of the problems are identified, we can propose alternatives, which are called conservation practices, and we'll go over some of those conservation practices. And then we can also provide financial assistance to help farmers implement conservation practices on their farm. And so you're just looking at a progression of how the process works, and I'll get into this later in the program and some of the program details as well. We have, as I said, we have both technical assistance and financial assistance. Our technical assistance is divided into three really broad categories of engineering, ecological sciences, and soils. Our engineers do anything that's a constructed hard practice, such as a waste storage facility or manure pits or composting facilities. The ecological sciences staff, of which I'm a member, I'm the agronomist, we provide essentially management recommendations to farms for like improving soil health, reducing erosion, improving grazing management, increasing the intensity of forestry management, perhaps if a landowner is interested in that, and also in helping on wildlife projects. And of course, soils. I mean, that's kind of where we started. I mean, we were responsible for mapping the soils of the country, and our soil staff are still involved in that. Just some of the things that our engineers that could help with, especially in helping with farmers implement composting on their farm, is we have two conservation practices. One's called composting facility, but another, I'm just showing an example of another one called access road. But these practices are engineered and designed by our staff engineers. These projects can be as simple as, like a roofed multi-bin composting facility on farm, or it could be as involved as a large operation like this that could be composting large quantities of animal manure brought in, carbon materials that are brought in to help balance the C/N ratio, along with food waste that might also have a small C/N ratio. So the one thing that I should caution you on is that our engineers are stretched thin. We have a huge demand for their services, so sometimes it takes a little while to work through the design and engineering and construction process with our engineers. But all of our materials, regardless of whether or not we provide financial assistance, is available online. So for example, if you were interested in seeing the dirty details of constructing an access road on your farm, or a composting facility for that matter, all of the design details are located in our electronic field office technical guide. And in section 4, every conservation practice that we offer has these various documents for the conservation practice standard, the statement of work, which is essentially the list of deliverables that are provided, a conservation practice overview, And also we also have standard drawings or standardized designs for all of our practices. So the majority of the work that we do, as I said, is based on solving problems that are identified on the farm, and those can be anything from soil erosion, sheet and rill erosion, to erosion along with water quality, or as I'm sorry, the one thing I wanted to mention is that the other thing that we should really keep in mind when we're looking at some of these issues in the field is that the question here is, do we really have a soil erosion problem, or do we really have a water infiltration problem? That word water is just not returning and getting into the soil, infiltrating fast enough to prevent this runoff. So conservation practices that might be recommended in situations like this could be anything as simple as cover cropping and conservation crop rotation, or rotating a cornfield back into hay, or reducing tillage, or even going to no-till or strip cropping. So anything that's going to help increase soil organic matter, reduce compaction, help get that water down back into the groundwater where it will do us much more good than running off. And likewise, soil organic matter depletion can be a huge issue on farms. And this is where one of the conservation practices that we're going to talk about later this morning is this new practice that we have called soil organic amendment, where farmers can apply for financial assistance to have organic matter added to their soils to increase the amount of organic matter, and also hopefully reduce the amount of compaction in our soils. Compaction is one of those silent killers that we see in farm fields. That's usually tillage induced. It usually develops over many years with conventional tillage, plowing, disking, harrowing, and eventually a compacted layer ends up beneath that plow pan. And that is also leading to not only crop production issues, but as I said, problems with infiltration and increasing and runoff. So a lot of those practices that I mentioned earlier for soil erosion are also really important for improving soil quality and soil health. But this is the one that I'm going to talk about today, this increasing this soil carbon amendment. And these soil carbon amendments can be as simple as adding wood chips or straw to farm fields, for example, in an intense vegetable production. We're also working with farmers on cover cropping and no-tilling. And what we're hoping to see with this soil carbon amendment is that we're also going to see some changes in management that led to those reduced soil organic matter levels. So we're hoping that farmers take a more holistic approach to their soil health management and incorporate cover crops and reduce tillage wherever possible, so that we essentially reconnect the soil profile to the groundwater, and so that we can eliminate these poorly aggregated soils that have this, as a result of tillage, that also are limited by plow pans that might be present. What we see with reduced tillage is we see the reconnection of the soil biota, helping the soil aggregation heal, and just better infiltration of water, better nutrient cycling, and just overall better soil health. So, like, this is just a real quick visual on what happens when you drop well aggregated soil into a jar of water, as opposed to a poorly aggregated soil over here on the right. That poorly aggregated soil essentially just explodes as the water infiltrates, whereas well aggregated soil allows that water to penetrate those pores. The pores stay open, and water is allowed to infiltrate, as opposed to causing sedimentation and water quality problems. Just one last issue on some of this water holding capacity is, when I was in Massachusetts in 2016, we had a really bad drought, and I think it was bad up here as well, but we went almost 2.5 months without rain in Western Massachusetts, and farmers that no-tilled and cover cropped had a crop to harvest, as opposed to even the farmers that did plant a cover crop but conventionally tilled it. They essentially, their soils just were not resilient enough to withstand that lack of moisture. So what we're hoping is that this soil carbon amendment practice is going to help farmers get more carbon back into their soils, build soil organic matter levels, and also build water holding capacity in their soils to withstand some of these really like unheard of storms that now seem to happen more often than we'd like. So the idea is to go not from that type of soil, but to something like this, that is just healthy and well aggregated. So the soil carbon amendment, the goal is to essentially increase soil organic matter levels, and also improve plant productivity and health by adding either compost or biochar or other soil or other carbon amendments, such as wood ash or wood chips. Determining what the need is can be as simple as a soil organic matter level from a standard soil test from a land-grant university, or it can be a complete soil health test from like Cornell University. What we're looking for is soils that have less than 5% organic matter by volume, or another resource concern that might be identified using this soil health test. Other resource concerns might be soil compaction, or a lack of beneficial organism habitat, or just lack of biological diversity in your soils. Assumptions that we're making is that the compost or the soil carbon amendment is going to either, as I said, it's going to either be a compost that you have an analysis for, or a biochar product, or a mix of compost or biochar. And we're also shooting for an application rate of for example, for compost and biochar, we're looking at, we'd like to see somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 tons to the acre, if possible. Now, these can be items that a farmer creates themselves on their own farm through inputs that are brought onto the farm. For example, small quantities of food waste. If you are under that 2,000 yard commercial limit, that would be a source, as well as like whatever bulking agent that you're using to complete your compost recipe. Some of the payment rates that we have.
Tom, can we just sneak a question in before you get into the payment rates?
Sure.
Because it's more about the methodology.
Sure.
So one question is, does direct application of wood chips to crop plots present a problem to operating equipment or seeding success? Are the chips too chunky?
What we've seen is that chips that are, there are two things. If they're surface applied and into a type of permanent bed situation, there's no problem because there's no nitrogen tie up at all. If the wood chips are from like a landscaping company that is using the small branches and leaves, or not even without leaves, as long as the branches are from mostly small branches, like anything from 4 to 6 inches down to the stems, and that's where all the nutrients are. It's when you get into commercial wood chips that are coming from a forestry application that probably have a greater concentration of heartwood as opposed to sapwood. You're going to have a much wider C to N ratio, and then you're going to have issues with nitrogen tie up and immobilization. So those are all things that the conservation planner from NRCS is going to discuss with you, because every farm is different and every source of soil carbon amendment is going to be different. So the other thing that we're probably also going to encourage you to do a little bit of experimentation on your farm as well, and like don't bet the entire farm on one rate. This is, as I said, this is kind of a brand new practice with NRCS. This was the very first year that we actually offered it. It was actually, you can see it has an 800 number for a code, which is unusual. Most of our codes are 300, 400, 500. The 800 codes are reserved for interim practices. And by interim, I mean they're kind of experimental. Now, this practice got fast laned, and it's becoming a full-fledged national conservation practice. Next year, beginning in October, it's going to have a new code number. It'll be code 336. It'll have the same name. It'll be called soil carbon amendment. And the one thing that we don't know yet is whether or not all of these payment rates and will remain the same. We had two payment rates this year because it was experimental that Washington messed up on. We had a compost offsite rate that was, they just didn't do the math correctly, and the rate was extremely high. So it was something that we had to take off our cost list. But this year, so these are the payment rates, and these are dollars, and here are the units, acres. Now, I know that the availability of biochar here in Vermont is not great. We really don't have any large commercial operations that are producing it yet. We do have We do have a biochar plant in Maine that is coming online that should be available, we hope, this coming year. But what we would really like to see is we'd like to see farmers avail themselves of either making their own compost on site or purchasing it from another farm that is producing it. So as I said, these are the dollar rates. For example, this year was $264 per acre for you to produce your own compost on farm. The other one that we had a lot of interest in was wood ash, high carbon wood ash for applying to farm fields. So as I said, we're hoping to encourage more interest in this from farmers. We feel this is a great climate smart solution for agriculture, just getting more carbon into our soils by hook or crook, and we're hoping that we can encourage farmers to consider that. So the majority. No, go ahead, Natasha.
Let me know when you have when it's a good time for a few questions on this.
Now is good, because now I'm just going to go into some of like how NRCS provides financial assistance to get some of these things going on farms.
Sure. So one question is whether the payment rates that you just shared were Vermont specific, or are they national?
These are Vermont specific.
And can you speak to, because this was sort of an interim practice, maybe not all states are using this code right now, the code 808, is that correct?
Correct. I think most of the states in New England are using it. Vermont and California and Massachusetts were three of the earliest states to jump on board with this, and this was the first year that it was offered as a practice under EQIP, and I'll get into what EQIP is in just a second.
Sure.
But,
we have a couple other questions. One about the rates. I'll ask that first and then go back to the other one. So
yep.
Is just to clarify, are the rates for purchased compost then? Is that what, as opposed to making farmers who might be producing compost on their farm?
Yeah. So for example, let's say, for example, we did have a compost offsite that was purchased that was, somewhere in the neighborhood of like say $100 an acre or $150 an acre. It would be to apply, depending on what the soil test recommendations are, it could be, like anywhere from 2 to 5 tons per acre. So it would be on a per acre basis. So
regardless of whether the
regardless of the quantity, yeah,
and regardless of the quantity, and regardless of whether it's purchased or made on the farm.
Well, yes, for this would be if you made it on your farm, this would be like however many acres you are trying to make compost for. So for example, if you were trying to make compost for 20 acres and you were applying like 5 tons to the acre, this would be 20 acres times 264. So it would be what, approximately $10,000, something like that.
And so the compost offsite is the one that you said got a little mixed up.
Yes, so that's the one that we'll have back. Okay. That one will be back
next year.
It'll be back in beginning in October 1st, right?
Okay, great. And then the next question is, once the CPS is being implemented, are there additional soil testing Is there any additional soil testing done to show the impact of the process of the practice?
Yes, that's also that can also be used to before and after, and those can all be included in EQIP contracts. So you can get a you can do the soil health test with Cornell as part of this soil carbon amendment, and then you can also have one after the compost has been applied. This can also be done on an annual basis. So depending on if you have the wherewithal to apply it annually for 3 years, that's a possibility. And then test after that, or test in the middle. It's completely up to like what the farmer's goals and objectives are. And once again, we're encouraging farmers to look at this as I said, as a whole farm system, right? That we're trying to get farmers to look at some of the tillage management that's going on the farm that might have led to reduced soil organic matter levels. Now, it could be just that compost wasn't available, or growing a cover crop for a full summer wasn't an option. But those are the things that our conservation planners can discuss with the farmer and come up with alternatives.
Great. One more rate question. The initial rates put out were based on a per yard unit, and this looks like it's based on a per acre basis. Is that a change, or was there a mix up somewhere? Okay,
yeah,
that was a
change. And once again, as I said, this was kind of like the test year, and I think they realized that they got a lot of stuff wrong. So we're hoping that it's vastly improved come October 1st.
Great.
So if you have not started this process yet with NRCS, now is the time to get your conservation plan. If you are already working with NRCS, get your conservation plan updated. Contact your local conservation planner. If you're not already working with NRCS, that's where a lot of our programs, and that's what I'm going to get into next. A lot of our programs require some documents to be filed with our sister agency, the Farm Service Agency, who handles all of our eligibility forms. So a lot of the paperwork with FSA, for example, getting your farm number, getting your tract number that delineates all the land that you own or operate, so that FSA they are the data holder. They hold the farm records, and they hold all the eligibility paperwork. So you really have to work with Farm Service Agency as well as NRCS. NRCS helps you with the conservation plan and some of these financial assistance programs like EQIP. The EQIP program is by far our largest financial assistance program, and it's really meant to fix those resource concerns or to fix problems. And so soil erosion or water quality issues or soil health issues, problems like that, we can recommend those conservation practices that you can apply for financial assistance, which the reimbursement rates, like after you plant your cover crop or after you do the soil health test, the reimbursement rates are somewhere between 70 and 90%. And sometimes they're almost 100% of the cost. But the EQIP program is by far our largest financial assistance program with NRCS in Vermont. The conservation stewardship program is really for rewarding good management. So you're already operating at a fairly sustainable level, and it's really just to provide you a reward for that. And there are payments for existing practices that you're already implementing on your farm. At, for example, at cropland, it's $7.50 an acre. And then you're also paid for conservation practices and also what are called enhancements. And you're also paid for addressing the number of resource concerns on your farm, which I believe this year was like $300 per resource concern. So the conservation stewardship program is really for farms that really don't have a lot of resource concerns on their farm to fix. If you are interested in the soil carbon amendment, EQIP is probably your best option. We accept applications for financial assistance throughout the year. So as soon as you're happy with your conservation plan, where it's at, and you want to apply for getting some of these conservation practices funded, you just fill out an application with your local NRCS office. We review and rank those applications throughout the year. Funding is usually awarded this time. It's usually late spring. So farmers who are already in the program, who have been awarded an EQIP contract, are going to be receiving their letters like this month if you haven't already received it. And you can start working on your projects as soon as the money is officially what's called obligated, which means it's committed to your farm. Now, this bullet right here, working with your FSA office, this really should be one of the first things that you do when you start working on your conservation plan with NRCS, because your all your eligibility stuff with FSA can be done at the same time or even first. And but what they're going to do is eligibility just means that you have gone through the planning process, or you've at least started it, and then that you've filled out these other forms with FSA to complete their eligibility. And then, as I said, once the contract is awarded, then farmers can start working on implementing those programs. And as I said, the the funding is usually finalized. So right now, what are called pre-approval letters are going out to customers. Those approvals will be final, usually anywhere from summer to September, October, and then farmers can start working immediately on their projects. If you're not funded, what's usually you're rolled over, your application is rolled over into the next funding cycle, and you just get in line for you get in line for next fiscal year if you want. So it's as I said, it's a fluid process. The conservation planning process is also fluid. It's really based on the customer's goals and objectives, and NRCS planners are they'll come out to your farm, they'll help you work on identifying issues and help you. You may already have an idea of what you want to do, and they may say that's perfect, exactly spot on. They may have some suggestions for considering something else. They may ask you to, see if you're interested in talking to one of our engineers. So as I said, it's kind of a fluid process, but and then just the kind of the some of the finer print that all of our financial assistance is reported as taxable income. You do receive a 1099 from the IRS on it, but for the most part, farmers are able to usually work through this pretty easily. And then just one last thing that I wanted to and I'll provide this in my presentation that I send to Natasha that she'll make available afterwards. But this idea of adding carbon to the land is not new. SCS had a publication going back from the 1950s. And we already knew back then that wood chips was great for improving soil health, even though we didn't know what soil health was back then in the 50s. When I was a graduate student in the 90s, soil health wasn't an idea. Soil quality was just becoming a thing, and no one knew how to measure soil quality. So, we've kind of come a long way, but we really have been talking about these things for a long time. So I'm going to put this publication in with my presentation that I'll send to Natasha. And one last thing that I received from a colleague of mine at Cornell, Brian Caldwell, who recently retired from the organic systems management program at Cornell, sent me this article from the 1970s where they were using hardwood chips in vegetable production, and they were doing experimental designs way back 50s and 60s, and that led to this paper being written in the 1970s. So this information is out there. We just need to resurrect it and get farmers to think about these things a little more critically. And with apologies to Mr. Einstein, we can't keep doing we can't keep farming the way we've been farming with climate change. It's going to eat our lunch eventually. So we just need to think how we can crack this nut, and soil health has a lot to do with it. And I think anything that we can do to get more carbon in our soils, less tillage, more cover crops, more soil carbon amendments, that's how we build soil health and build resiliency. So anything that we can do to help you reach those goals, I hope you'll consider reaching out to your NRCS staff, and please reach out to me. My email is on the first slide. As I said, I'm in the Colchester office. I have statewide responsibilities. I love doing field visits with our staff, and I'd love to come visit if you'll have us. So I guess with that, I'll end, Natasha, and see if there are any more questions.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions. We're just going to stay on the wood chip theme for a minute. Deb says, wood chips have a high C to N if applied directly. And you already touched on this, but I thought maybe you could just circle back to this. Do you ever witness problems with wood chips tying up nitrogen for crops, or are these being applied to soils that already have ample or excess nitrogen?
It really comes down to how they're applied. If you're, and once again, also the type of wood chip. If the wood chip is relatively easily degradable wood, like I said, those small stems where all the nutrients are, those are going to break down a lot faster and not cause a nitrogen immobilization or tie-up. It's when you have really coarse wood chips with, or it could be also really fine wood chips like sawdust, where you have huge surface area, and you also have softwood, which is also going to have a higher C to N ratio and tie up more nitrogen. So it's really site specific and case specific as far as where that nitrogen mobilization happens. And those two articles that I mentioned, actually the article from Cornell and also another write-up that Brian Caldwell did, they look specifically at not only wood chips applied as kind of like a surface mulch, but also applied and incorporated lightly into the soil. And it really, they really did not have the detrimental effect. Now, once again, you need to know what you're applying too. You know, like you're not going to, apply, like 5 tons of sawdust to the acre and incorporate that and then not expect a nitrogen drag. So the one thing that we're encouraging is that that we be thoughtful in how we're doing this, right? And that we're thinking through all the like consequences. And that's what our staff is there for. And if you're not getting the questions answered properly, reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to, like I said, to help.
Great. Another question. We've talked a little bit about compost applications in terms of organic matter and the carbon amendments. Is compost application also recommended for decreasing soil erosion and runoff? Is that a practice to target those issues?
Indirectly, it is, yes. I mean, anything that we can do to increase the amount of organic matter in our soil is going to help reduce erosion. Now, there's some cases where, when you're on a steep field and you're on an 8% slope, surface applied compost isn't going to help very much. So this is where the holistic thing comes in, where we really need to be thinking about on those steep fields, we need to be thinking about some type of breaks in slopes or permanent vegetation or some type of bed and mulch system that has aisles or dedicated aisles that are less erosive. So, but on fields where we have gentle topography, where we have slopes under 3%, surface applied composts like mulches are going to work. Once again, we need to be cognizant of our proximity to surface water, and that if we do have systems like this where we're surface supplying compost, that we have adequate buffers around. I mean, buffers are like the last resort. We like to refer to them as diapers. They're going to catch things, but once again, we should be stopping the problem at the source. We shouldn't be allowing the erosion to happen in the first place to allow the sedimentation to get to the buffer. Yeah, it's nice to have buffers and diapers, but it's much better if we can, like I said, improve soil health, increase our water holding capacity, our soil's ability for infiltration, just create that healthier soil so that we don't have runoff. You don't lose nutrients, you don't lose any type of agrochemicals that you might be using. Just better overall for the environment and also better overall for the farmer's bottom line.
Great. Thank you. We have another question about the rates, going back to rates. So 265 per yard applied versus 265 per acre applied is a big difference, of course. And so the question is it possible to see the assumptions behind the updated payment scenarios?
Yes, once those, we haven't even seen them yet, but once they are available, I'd be more than happy to share them. And we will have them on our website, and I can just make sure that Natasha gets them for her website as well.
Great, thank you. Another question that came in is, are farms that are already making compost on the farm eligible for equip rate, or does that put them into the CSP program?
Once again, it depends on what you need in your fields. I mean, if your soil organic matter levels are low, if they're under 5%, or if there's, like I said, if there's another resource concern that's identified, you might not have beneficial habitat. You might, this might also be a result of tillage, right? So if you're willing to cut back on the amount of tillage that you're doing, think about a longer rotation perhaps, or somehow integrating, like a summer cover crop once every 4 years, 5 years, that would make you eligible.
Great. And if any of the folks who have asked these questions have follow-up questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in chat as well. And while you're thinking about that, I'm just going to ask a question that I get a lot from farms that I work with is around scale. And so, a lot of farms obviously come in all different shapes and sizes. And there are a lot of really small scale farmers who are, doing, initiating great practices, getting engaged and more in composting. And they, I guess the question that I get is sort of like, they feel that a lot of the NRCS programs are not for them because of scale. And then also, we were working with one farmer who was actually in New Hampshire, so it's a little different perhaps, but he got an EQIP grant, but then wasn't able, it was for a much larger compost facility than he wanted on his farm. And there did not seem to be the flexibility to say, like, I want a third of that area. I don't want this whole huge space. Can we adjust the scale? And he's actually not pursuing it, at least this year, because of some impasses there. And so I just want to, I'm always trying to sensitize, especially in Vermont, where there are a lot of small scale farms. This may not be true, well, I think this is true in a lot of rural areas, but, it may be slightly different in other states. But for the people I work with, that's a real concern. And so I'd love for you to just address that and maybe either give some insight or suggestions for how people could navigate them.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, and this has come up in discussions with NRCS at the national level for the last probably 5 years, and it was driven primarily by urban farmers who wanted to participate. These programs had traditionally been reserved for a lot of big farms. And a lot of big farms aren't in our area. And so we're starting to see more things like this, these small area, these small area payment rates for all practices. So for example, we have one for a composting facility. We also have one for cover crop. We have one for no-till. So, all these things can be part of your conservation plan. And I guess the one to kind of dovetail to the comment from New Hampshire is that is kind of the downside of rushing into a financial assistance contract that you're not really that everyone's not on the same page, that it's really important that you arrive at that conservation plan, and that it's, that you're really, before you start applying for programs and say, oh yeah, I want, I want a 2-acre compost pad. And it's like, okay, you may have the manure and everything to handle that, but that means that, you might not be land applying manure at all. That might be like your entire year's worth of manure that compost pad is being sized for. So it's making sure that the details are correct, make sure that the customer is getting what the customer wants, and that everyone's on the same page. And then once you're ready to apply, once you've arrived at that point, then I would encourage you to apply for financial assistance. Like have a plan. That's my take-home message is like, have a plan of what you want to do, and then do your homework, and then just make sure that NRCS is helping you get there.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So James asks, says that you mentioned the compost facility practice. What practices cover infrastructure?
Yeah, so the composting facility would cover infrastructure. As I said, access road could also be used if you don't have availability to the site. Depending on the site, you may also need you may have to deal with runoff that could be emanating from the composting facility. So if you have a hay field, that can be used as kind of like a vegetated treatment area. That would be another thing that would be used for as an engineering practice. I think what the questioner is getting at is there money for equipment, for example, machines for turning the compost or making the compost, and that we don't provide, but the Agency of Agriculture, through their CEAP program, the CEAP, which I believe is the I should know this, but it's their it's a Conservation Equipment Assistance Program. The CEAP program through the Agency of Agriculture can help with equipment purchases. So NRCS can't pay for equipment. I mean, how you use this money that this is, oops, once again, sorry about that. It's totally up to you. This estimate comes from what it takes to essentially make enough compost to spread it on an acre of land. So you might already have some of that cost already built into your overhead. So then it's really just your time and your labor.
If I can clarify my question, I think you actually sort of answered it. I just was would we find the compost facility practice just in the list of equip, like payment schedule, just like we would this practice?
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and the payment schedule rates are they're on one large web page for the entire country, but I can make sure that those are with my presentation as well. And then the payment, as I said, the payment rates are a little different for CSP as opposed to equip, but there are some other programs that also leverage equip, depending on what part of the state that you're in Vermont. We have what's called these regional conservation partnership programs, where we have partners that are helping do the technical assistance. and but it's all EQIP money. So and there's also, as I said, there's these are the two big ones, but we also have we have a bridge program between EQIP and CSP. It's called EQIP CIC, and it's EQIP CIC stands for Conservation Incentive Contract, and it's to help farmers transition from EQIP to CSP. So for example, say for example, you might have a soil carbon amendment and a composting facility, and that's the only thing you need. That might be a perfect opportunity for EQIP CIC. So once again, these are all questions for your field office staff at your local office. You know, we have offices all across the state. I'm actually sitting in the field office in Brattleboro today. We have a staff meeting later this afternoon, but we go everywhere. We're, you know, like we are in Newport, we're in St. Albans, we're in Middlebury, Rutland, White River, Morrisville. Just stop in and say hello, get acquainted, and get on the lists. First come, first serve. Our staff are busy, but they're very helpful and conscientious people. So,
Yeah,
and as I
James.
said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly as well.
James, go ahead. You had another question.
Sorry, thanks for answering all my questions. It's really helpful. So I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding. So it sounds like the payment scenarios were changed at the federal level. Is that and that sort of trickling down to the states? Because when the initial payment schedules came out, I was studying them very closely and trying to understand them. And they're all by cubic yard. And it sounds like they've made the shift at the federal level, and that's why there aren't details necessarily.
Yeah, and James, I'm not a gambler, but I would venture a guess that these acre rates aren't really making any sense to anybody, so that they're probably going to end up going back to the yardage rates. Yeah, we're just going to have to stay tuned until Washington gets its act together. No, we're unfortunately, a lot of the people in Washington get there before they have a lot of experience in the field, and so these things are kind of trickle up where we identify problems and let them know it, and so they've been put on notice that this needs to be fixed, and so yeah, it's a work in progress.
You're role modeling how we all iterate in our systems, right?
We're trying.
It's part of life. Any other questions for Tom? What was the name of the regional body that you mentioned that was helping with implementation?
Okay, so we have a number of, they're called regional conservation partnership programs, and we have a number of them around the state. I believe if you go to our website and look for RCPP, you'll come up with a list of our partners, and one of them is Department of DEC, Environmental Conservation. Another one is American Farmland Trust, and they're working in different areas of the states around different watersheds. Another one is we have one around Lake Memphremagog with the Orleans Conservation District. So those they're kind of like regional EQIP programs that have special funding pools. So I believe that American Farmland Trust one is in the White River Junction, Connecticut River Valley area. But those, as I said, it's all EQIP money. So you may be in a part of the state that doesn't have one of those RCPP projects, But as I said, our staff is getting pretty good at slotting applications into available money, because we are just trying to move as much assistance out to farmers as we possibly can. So
Great, thank you. And Tom, if you stop sharing your screen, I'm just going to put up my closing slide. And while I'm doing this, Tom, I'll let you answer. Linda asked, for folks in states where the carbon amendment practice has not been approved, what should they do?
it will be approved in fiscal 24. So you should reach out to your local NRCS office. I think a lot of states might have been a little slow to adopt the interim practice because they weren't sold on it. But I think Washington is saying you will adopt it beginning in 24. So
and that's October of 2024.
Yeah, October 1st. Yeah. I'm sorry, no, October 1st of 23 is the beginning of fiscal October. 24. This October is the beginning of fiscal 24, right?
Great. So coming soon.
Coming soon,
state
exactly.
near you. Great.
And I should also,
Oops.
I was just going to say,
Please.
We are a federal agency, so NRCS is in every state. Reach out to your local NRCS office. A lot of states have offices in every county. We here in Vermont, we don't have quite that many, but yeah, we have federal programs they're supposed to be similar across state lines. So
great, thank you very much. And one last question. Jonathan asks, is there a webinar where we can preview to better prepare when those funds are available in October? So I don't know if Vermont did a sort of a public webinar about 808, or
I don't think we did, but we usually put that information up on well, there's our website, and then there's also NRCS sends out press releases through our Gov delivery automated system. And so if you sign up to Gov delivery, you should be receiving, you'll get all the information from our state office saying, it's like apply now, applications are being accepted until, like, for example, I believe we just recently stopped applications for the Inflation Reduction Act for this year, just to like as a cutoff. But if you're signed up with that Gov delivery system, you'll get notified anytime anything big happens. So
good way to stay in touch.
I can put that in my notes as well.
Great. All right, thank you. Ben just says, thanks. This program will support local resource recycling via composting while simultaneously reimbursing farmers for adding organic matter to their soils. It's a win-win. He's excited to see this implemented, and appreciation just for all of the information today. So yes, thanks, Tom. I'll just echo that. Thank you so much for joining us as part of the VORS program this year. It's been super helpful. And thanks as well to all of our participants for joining us and engaging in this topic. There's a lot of resources out there, and we're just looking to help figure out how to make them accessible to those who are needing them. Yep. And that's, part of getting the word out. Thanks again, everybody. And thanks so much, Tom.
Thanks, everyone.